Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Tuesday, October 8th, 2019. Russia, if you're listening, Daily Co's Radio is live now. As we found out all the way from Portland, Maine, which you'd think we were based in Portland, Maine or something, but we're not. We do maintain an embassy there, though. Thanks, Bill. Daily Co's Radio is live now. Kagro X, me, David Waldman. Well, look at this. Brings his great and unmatched wisdom to the airwaves. Of course, that's a line I think everybody got a good chance to steal from Donald Trump. If I, in my great and unmatched wisdom, decide that it's time for another show, then it's time for another show. There's nothing you can do about it. The real kind, of course, not the lunatic in the White House kind, so that's cool. We have the genuine article here. He has the, I guess, Chinese-made knockoff of great and unmatched wisdom. That was a bit of an awakening yesterday. Really should have ended in nets and straitjackets, but it didn't because we're all busy normalizing wacko presidents. Everybody is. As a matter of fact, we're even normalizing previous wacko presidents. I am not going to spend a great deal of time criticizing Ellen DeGeneres for what she has for her weekend activities, because honestly, at some level, certainly what Ellen DeGeneres does during the weekend doesn't matter a great deal. But there is, there's some calling to account to be. I'm not saying we have to cancel Ellen DeGeneres or, whatever. I'm just saying that it made a lot of people remember that George W. Bush was kind of a psychopath himself and probably shouldn't be normalized. On the other hand, I will say, I'm not a celebrity. I'm not used to this stuff. I guess if I got invited to I don't know. It's a problematic thing. One big problematic sandwich, I guess. One after another. But I guess if you wanted to be like super woke about everything, then you would have to acknowledge, well, for one thing, you probably shouldn't be at a football game anyway. But, American tradition, we still normalize the idea that we should take, a bunch of kids and have them put on helmets and bang their heads together until they get concussive degenerative diseases and do so for our entertainment, and we'll throw millions of dollars at them for a brief period of time, then toss them out of the league and say, you're on your own, retired at 30, good luck, and then everyone will swindle their money away from them, etc. Okay, so there's problems with football, there's problems with Jerry Jones, there's a problem with hobnobbing with the ultra wealthy and famous, I suppose, but you're a famous person, you get invited. I guess if you get invited to sit in the owner's box at an NFL game, I guess, as a normal person, you kind of go. And I guess they're friendly with Jerry Jones' daughter, and that's sort of the normalization mechanism too, but I don't know what she's like, and yada, yada. I can't imagine the apple fell very far from the tree. So yeah, and then of course you sit there and you're like, well, I got invited and I'm not going to tell my host, oh, by the way, screw you. I'm going to make a political spectacle out of your invitation to come and watch a football game. But I don't know. I guess there's room for everybody in this controversy. Anyway, I guess I'm saying as a normal person, if I got invited to something like that, I'd probably say, I really don't want to be sitting here next to George W. Bush. If I were the kind of person whose reputation could help normalize him, I would say, this is problematic. But would I say, yeah, host, screw you, I'm going to make a big scene, it's got to be about me and my politics, and, I'm going to leave very visibly, and, honestly, watching the football game isn't going to change very much. And George W. Bush, he's very good at getting himself renormalized afterwards. I paint, there's a picture of me in the bathtub or the shower or whatever the hell it was, and I goof around and do fun things, and that's supposed to make you forget that I authorized the murders and tortures, etc. But it can't all fall on one person. I don't know. That's all I'm saying here. So I don't think we need to kidnap and re-educate Ellen DeGeneres necessarily, but there are legitimate points out there that if we weren't involved in the impeachment of the current lunatic president, I would say we could spend more time parsing. And by the way, about the political act as well. I mean, I'm going to make your football game about a political act. Well, Colin Kaepernick. He politicized things. They politicized back by refusing to hire him. You know, it happens everywhere. People do politicize football. Besides which, this is Dallas Cowboys, America's team, and he makes damn sure everybody knows it. And ostentatious displays of wealth in the stadium itself, and it's as political an act as anything going to see a Dallas Cowboys game. So, you know, there's that too. But like I said, many other things that we could be focusing on today. And so we will. How about that? Tomorrow, Yom Kippur, means I'm out again as I go and atone for, honestly, a lot of these sins, I didn't even start them. Somebody else did. I just got wrapped up in it, and I was too embarrassed to leave, I guess. Something like that. I was invited by Jerry Jones. Not my original sin, but I should have left. Anyway, lots to do tomorrow. It will keep me off the air once again at a critical moment, and on a Wednesday at that, which will disrupt our normal schedule with Greg and Joan. I have let them both know about that, and of course, we'll take their calls any day. Today's Tuesday, day after, we're back on the air Thursday, but schedules being what they are, I can't just make everybody else jump through the same hoops I'm jumping through. It's not their responsibility, and they might even be done atoning for their sins, for all I know. They did it ahead of time. So, lots to catch up on, including, as I said in this morning's post, catching up on the things that other people are catching up on that we did last week. We have to spend time acknowledging that they caught up on these things. It looks like we're really kind of converging, coalescing around the working theory that the Ukraine mess was at its heart. I'm going to halt between every word or phrase to find my way through this thought. But as we were reading yesterday, not only the thread from Susan Simpson, The View from LL2 on Twitter, that seemed to land in the same place. The idea that much of the Ukraine mess seemed connected, if not originating with, a probably corrupt business deal that two Ukrainian-American con men, as they've been described, were interested in pushing through. But of course, it would have to be with fossil fuel at the center, too. So, like I said last week, I think what may have happened here is these two nuts, and I don't know which came first. I don't know which is the chicken and which is the egg here exactly. But these two nuts decided that they could make a killing in liquid natural gas for a couple of reasons. Not the least of which, of course, is that they know very well that President Trump is likely to bend over backward to try to make a deal that involves fossil fuels to own the libs, basically, if for nothing else. And, of course, he's heard that you can make a lot of money in those deals, and he thought he would take a cut, probably by taking a piece of this action. So these two guys with no natural gas or energy experience decided, well, the people I know who are making a killing are making it in energy, so we're going to get into that. But the Ukraine, where we're from, has a national monopoly, a state-owned national natural gas monopoly running things, plus a few other actors at the fringes of the energy sector. I guess there's still room, even with this state-owned enterprise working in gas. There's a lot of angles that you can work to broker this stuff. And what they decided was that they would be more likely to be able to elbow their way in, I think, and make a killing, is if executives running, or even the entire organization of either this state-owned monopoly in gas, or and or the other energy companies working at the fringes were accused of some wrongdoing. Their executives arrested or put under suspicion or kept under some cloud that would make it advantageous for the Ukrainian government, be it the prior government or the new one, to disassociate themselves from it and start anew with someone else. And in Ukraine, there's a pretty good chance that you could credibly accuse almost anyone of the kind of corruption that would get them arrested or at least cast a shadow over their work, especially in this new anti-corruption atmosphere with which Zelensky was ushered in. So it seemed like a plan that would work, except, of course, with Trumpsters involved, the likelihood that it would all be exposed and that even if it wasn't a brand new scandal that rose to the level of impeachment all by itself, which Trump turned it into by also seeking quid pro quo profit from the same deal as opposed to simply quietly taking the kickbacks from somebody else's deal. And, well, what can I tell you? He exposed himself to great danger in that. But, it's always been a problem with Trump exposing himself. So let's catch up. Let's see. Yesterday, we left off with Susan Simpson's last, I think, third of 3 threads that I had from her. And I guess I should check back in and see if there's anything new. But we started this one, which was her follow-up thread, just to remember where we were. She was saying to follow up. Here is a quick and dirty primer on why liquid natural gas deals are at the heart of the Ukraine scandal and why Trump is trying to blame Perry for the whole mess. And there is the complicating factor that Rudy Giuliani claims to be working for Trump, but working for Trump for free. But he also says he has these other clients, and that's the Ukrainian-American weirdos Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman. They're actually paying clients, and whenever he was in Ukraine, he was allegedly both lobbying the Ukrainian government for on behalf of Donald Trump, the person, the candidate, more importantly, and seeking Ukrainian cooperation with an investigation of the Bidens. And at the same time, by the way, I'm also interested in the Ukrainian government using its power to push other actors out of the way, one way or another, in the liquid natural gas field, and allowing my 2 clients who have this pipe dream of being involved in the liquid natural gas business for whatever reason, because it's extremely lucrative. Can you make room for them to sell millions or even billions of dollars worth of natural gas here in Ukraine? That'd be nice too. That's a conflict of interest all by itself before you even get to the Trump quid pro quo. All right, so as she was saying here, we'll start with Parnas and Fruman of Global Energy Producers. Short story, they're professional scammers. Long story, she says she pointed you to the OCCRP's profile of the two. And yes, by the way, it kind of became a big story yesterday that what we discovered, I think, while we were on the air, which was that Susan Simpson's thread includes a photo of Parnas and Fruman, not Abe Froman, the Sausage King, Fruman, sorry. And, yes, you caught that, did you, Mike Musson, now noting for us. I get it, liquid natural gas pipe dream. That's right, pipeline. Small pun thrown in there for you. Glad you caught that. But this picture that they used in the Miami Herald article of last Tuesday, I think, that featured Parnas and Fruman and Trump and Giuliani as well. I can't tell whether it's in the White House that the picture is taken or what, possibly. But it was cropped kind of funny. I mean, you don't notice right away necessarily, but if you look carefully at the photo, you'll see that there is a person missing here. There's a shoulder from somebody who's been cropped out of the photo the shoulder of the, a suit shoulder. It's hard to see. It's like camouflage, dark suit over dark suit here, but obscuring, I think that's Fruman's shoulder as well. But I was wondering, well, I wasn't wondering. I was just looking at it. It never really occurred to me that it was cropped. I could see that there was somebody, but I guess that it was somebody kind of unimportant. But somewhere down below in Susan's thread here, there was another use of the same photo, except this time I noticed, hey, Mike Pence is in that photo. How strange that he should have been cropped out of the first one. That does seem odd, doesn't it? I don't know that there's anything nefarious going on, and my guess is that the Herald was just focusing on Giuliani and Trump and these two nuts, as opposed to, trying to do anything to protect Pence. Pence just wasn't really part of the picture on October 1st. He wasn't really deeply involved, I don't think, in the Ukraine scandal, but that has changed over the past couple of days, and so I suppose if they were running the story again, they might not crop Pence out, and now it's a story unto itself, but I don't know that there was anything, done by design. Although it would also be interesting. I did look up, this was a kind of a weird thing, and I saw it in passing, written up on the front page of Daily Kos. By the way, they sometimes pay attention to what we do over here on this side, and if I'm recalling things correctly, I shouldn't have to scroll too far, but yeah, there was a brief piece up on the front page about the weird use of these photos. So I guess it's possible also that the Miami Herald simply, that's not their photo, I don't think, so they must have licensed its usage from somewhere else. Unless they were just given permission to use it for free. But what I thought was interesting was the possibility that they had drawn it from some other source and it might have come to them cropped. And then I would have questions for, who was the source and what might their motivation have been for cropping it? Because I went looking for that picture to see who else is running it. And did anybody else discovered that Pence was in that photo and not in the one in the Miami Herald? And it appears that they haven't. And in fact, I used one of those, two different reverse image searches for, on the web to see who else is using this picture. Where else has it appeared? And it's kind of weird. It has appeared with Pence in, I got 2 or 3 hits for Russian and Ukrainian language websites. Ukrainian Pravda, basically, was the only one running this picture, and they were publishing it on about October 2nd or 3rd, after the Miami Herald story about Parnas and Fruman had run. But it's interesting. So they had the whole photo, but I wasn't able to actually get to that story page. Every time I clicked, it just brought me back to the front page of Ukrainian Pravda, and I don't read Ukrainian, so it was difficult for me to try to navigate my way to that story. But no American site, no English language site that I could find through these searches was running this picture with Pence in it. It was very odd. And there were a lot of hits for the Miami Herald and followers, people, other outlets that published after the Herald did, using the same cropped photo, and they came up in the hits because it is otherwise the identical photo. So the algorithm, doesn't distinguish between the two. But I couldn't find any English language or United States sources using the photo with Pence in it, except one, which was a random person's Twitter thread. Now it's a random person, but this is somebody who has been, one of those people that does their own internet research and tries to make connections between the various scandals. Theorists, I guess they are conspiracy theorists, but they very frequently turn out to be right, although they very frequently get way out ahead of the stories too. Everyone does. And this person had put together several very long threads, making connections, some of which I thought were probably could be substantiated, and others which I thought, well, I don't see much more. It's pretty tenuous. Certainly could be true, but I don't know. And they had this picture. It was the only English language source of this picture, which was really surprising, except that I had already also seen it. The second occurrence was in this Susan Simpson thread, and I'm not certain where she got it from. The person who included the picture just said they found it on Google Images. Thing is, they published that picture in their tweet thread I think it was dated like September 23rd, which is like a week or more before the Miami Herald published their story. And it's not that Parnas and Fruman were secrets until then. We read a couple of early profiles of them, and early ones that connected them to Giuliani and to Trump. It's been known for a while. I mean, part of the surprise of this whole Ukraine thing is how much of it has been out in the open for how long. But that picture I never saw published anywhere before October 1st. Obviously, it's older than October 1st. It's older than September 23rd. But just curious how it ends up in this one person's thread on September 23rd and nowhere else in the English-speaking world at any point before that. Like, where did you get it from? She said, I found it on Google Images, but who was running it? Because it's gone now, or at least I can't find it. It's just sort of beyond my initial pass on Google Images and TinEye Images, internet sleuthing. So anyway, side story for all that. But Walter Einenkel, is that how you pronounce your last name, Walter? We never speak it out loud, just like my own name. But he wrote up for Daily Kos front page the initial curious appearance of this thing under the title of there's a third man cropped out of the image of Trump, Giuliani, and the Ukrainian con men. And, it's Mike Pence, and he's got my tweet about it here. So, I don't know how much sleuthing I did, but I did happen to find that and found it interesting, and I hope a lot of people did too, and maybe we can get to the bottom of it. One day we can ask. I asked the person, as I said, where she found the picture, but I haven't asked Susan Simpson yet, and maybe I should do that next. Now, back to our old story about the background of Parnas and Fruman and their weird connection to this whole thing. There was, the Global Energy Producers, LLC, the company they started out of nowhere to capitalize on liquid natural gas. She points everybody to the OCCRP's profile of them, the Miami Herald article about them, and also Campaign Legal's, the Campaign Legal Center's complaint against Fruman and Parnas, also linked to in here. Professional background of Parnas and Fruman, mostly scamming, with a particular focus on scams involving luxury goods, real estate, and movies. One of Parnas's companies named Fraud Guarantee, which is a pretty straightforward description of the business practices. He also had a company called Lone Crime Investigative, though she says, to be fair, lone crimes do seem to be something Parnas actually has a great deal of experience in, and linking to a couple of lawsuits in which he's named. One thing Parnas and Fruman do not have is a background in energy, so it's strange, she notes, that in 2018 they opened Global Energy Producers, LLC, a company that is allegedly transacting in LNG, oil and gas, and solar energy. GEP's business model, you'll remember the weird, generic, non-committal language of capitalizing on opportunities around the world by leveraging domestic and international relationships. In particular, as GEP stated to the Daily Beast, they are involved in the exports of American liquid natural gas. However, there is no public record of GEP doing any actual business, which makes the $500,000 they gave away to Trump's super PACs and other Republican candidates so interesting. In fact, the only public record of activity by GEP is making large donations to Republican candidates and PACs, which makes total sense because GEP is in no way capable of doing any real energy business on its own. So now the question becomes, is this Putin and or oligarchs in Russia and or Ukraine just laundering money through GEP and into Republican campaigns? Is it something else? Are they stealing the money from Americans and repurposing it, or what? And the answer is, we don't know yet. Maybe Susan does. As Parnas and Fruman told one investor who later sued them, GEP's business model is to make large donations to conservative politicians, which, quote, garnered substantial goodwill with various powerful political allies that would greatly assist the business of GEP, herein referred to in the quote as defendant GEP, because they're being sued for yet another scam. Parnas and Fruman partner with industry leaders, that is to say, the actual energy companies, and use their connections to Trump, i.e. paying for Trump's personal attorney to represent them in Ukraine while he also represents Trump in Ukraine, thereby footing the bill for him to go and do this stuff for Trump in Ukraine. And they use their connections then to get energy contracts for their partners who actually have access to the energy involved. It will be GEP's partners, of course, whoever they turn out to be, who will actually be performing under any LNG export contracts that ultimately come together. And for GEP's efforts in making the deal come together, GEP will presumably get a cut of it. So who are those partners for GEP? We don't know, but it will matter a great deal when we find out who they are. These LNG deals are arguably more political than economic in nature, she says. And for the deals to happen, the U.S. government has to be trying to make them happen. So, who's paying Giuliani to make them happen? That's the subject of the second part of this Twitter thread, to which we will return once again after this short break. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Just happened to see a thread floating by that I wanted to join in at some point. Maybe we can talk about this at some later date, but making note for myself while regaining my footing here. Okay, there's so many interesting things happening. Let's continue on with Susan Simpson's thread here. So we're getting the gist of what's happening here. In order to make these liquid natural gas contracts happen, especially if you don't have any liquid natural gas to sell, and or you are selling it to a country which, at least ostensibly, has its own nationalized liquid natural gas monopoly, something has to change in the scheme of governance in Ukraine in order for there to be room in the market for these two nudniks and their Global Energy Producers LLC operation, and whoever they manage to, trick into letting them handle their natural gas contracting. Not to mention that there's an element of it here on the American side. It's ostensibly less in our capitalist system about changing the laws so that new entrants can come in. But we do our fair share of monopoly action here, especially when there's billions of dollars to be made. But at the very least, there's some regulatory hurdles that need to be cleared in order to be a player in the game. And if you, for instance, are able to bribe the president, well, it should be pretty easy from there on. So, Where were we with this? Yes, these LNG, liquid natural gas deals are arguably more political than economic in nature. For the deal to happen, the U.S. government has to be trying to make them happen. That's the sort of player that can get the Ukrainian government to change its rules. You could make a fantastic economic argument at the theoretical level and wait for it to filter down to policymakers in Ukraine, or you could attempt various methods of persuading the Ukrainian government to allow a new player into the gas market. Again, it could be a great economic argument made by the ambassador, or it could be an old-fashioned shakedown, and you can't have the aid you need to survive in the face of Russian aggression unless you, one, investigate Joe Biden, and two, my friends here want to sell liquid natural gas in your country. Why don't you make that legal? That would work. That would do it, right? Since Trump came into office, we did hear this part yesterday, but just as a reminder, U.S. liquid natural gas exports have quintupled. That's not an accident, and it doesn't sound like a terrible thing, right? Trump believes that foreign reliance on American liquid natural gas exports can be used to achieve U.S. foreign policy objectives, as well as to fix the U.S. trade deficits he so despises. A lot going on in that one. And it's not crazy to think that, if the world somehow became hooked on American liquid natural gas exports, that would put us in the driver's seat in more ways than we're already there, I suppose. It's always good to have leverage over people or be one of the chief suppliers of a necessary commodity like liquid natural gas. And, everyone knows that the petroleum exporting states have done very well for themselves in terms of increasing their influence globally. So why couldn't the same thing happen with liquid natural gas? I guess it could, but there's not as much of a monopoly on it here for the United States. Still, why not, right? And I guess the other layer to this is Trump is obsessed with trade deficits, and I guess it's not a crazy view then to say, all right, well, if we want to try and cut back on or eliminate trade deficits, if we are exporting much, much more of whatever it is, whether it be liquid natural gas or manufactured goods, and it's more likely to be liquid natural gas, honestly, at this point, that trade deficit is lowered. What good that does normal people, I'm not sure, but it seems to be a bragging point for him, and it's the kind of thing that economic types in their nice, sharp-looking suits tend to run around and say is an important thing, and he's interested in impressing them with that. So he pushes it. Seems to be working. It lowers the numbers, so he pushes it again. American liquid natural gas, though, Susan points out, and I'm not sure of the basis of this, but she's often well-researched, so I am willing to give her the benefit of the doubt here. American liquid natural gas generally can't compete on price with European energy, and I guess that's both because they may have it in greater abundance, but also perhaps, could also be a lower quality, I suppose, but also they're able to ship it or move it via pipeline, whereas we have to liquefy it and load it onto container ships and ship it across the ocean and then regasify it, I guess, on the other side. And, there's all sorts of transportation and handling expenses that go along with this, transactions costs. But American LNG generally can't compete then with European energy. So this massive increase in U.S. exports has only been achieved with the help of U.S. foreign policy. In other words, if it costs you more to buy American energy, but you do it anyway, you might wonder why that's the case, and apparently the answer is U.S. foreign policy. Trump has been particularly heavy-handed in how he presses foreign states to import American liquid natural gas, and part of that is his interest in erasing trade deficits, and he can speak to an allied country that ordinarily has as one of its priorities keeping other allies like the United States happy. And if the United States president, assuming it's a legitimate president and somebody whose demands can reasonably be met or discussed at the very least, if he shows up and says, well, it's causing me tremendous stress politically to have such a great trade deficit with you. I mean, it's not, most people really don't care, but if you have it in your head that it is, or I don't know, the IMF tells you it is, or whatever, one of the economic experts in the suit says it's a bad thing, and the president is upset about it and indeed obsessed about it, I guess then they can show up and say, I need to reduce the American trade deficit with you. You need to import foreign energy. Yes, American liquid natural gas is more expensive, but couldn't you do us the favor and help stabilize our markets, / put a couple bucks in my friend's pockets / mine, and buy some American liquid natural gas and help us out with our economic indicators. And that's the sort of thing, by the way, that approached by a previous president would also be a quid pro quo, but they would ordinarily be careful not to say, well, yeah, I mean, it's not really about, the part that you leave unsaid is, you don't say it's not really about the trade deficit, is really about my friend is in the liquid natural gas business, and if I make him happy, he'll make me happy by donating hundreds of thousands of dollars to my reelection, to members of my party, etc. But that's actually the unspoken part of a lot of these deals. But it's unspoken, but not with Trump. Trump likes to speak it out loud and also make it more blatant. Like, yes, we can increase the sales of American liquid natural gas to your country, but we can't quintuple them. Oh, well, you'd better, or else. And now we know what some of the or else is here. I didn't read the screenshots that she included with that, I guess by way of proof of her assertion that Trump has been heavy-handed in how he pressures foreign states to import liquid natural gas. But here's what she's got here. Is this from the Houston Chronicle, is what it appears to be from. Governments in Europe and across the globe, it says, are also coming under increasing pressure to buy American liquid natural gas from a Trump administration that has shown a willingness to upend long-standing trade norms in the interests of increasing U.S. exports. That's a very normalized way of saying things. President Trump himself has stepped forward to be a consistently big promoter of U.S. liquid natural gas when he's meeting with other heads of state. He's been very explicit about it, said Dan Yergin, an energy industry historian and vice chairman of the consulting firm IHS Markit. Markit, M-A-R-K-I-T, by the way. Europe has a great surplus of LNG gasification, but still, Germany has been supporting the development of 2 LNG terminals, seemingly out of deference to Washington. Within the administration, the expansion of natural gas markets abroad is considered a win-win, an opportunity to increase American influence abroad while also creating new markets for one of its fastest-growing industries. Geopolitically, Russia's near monopoly on gas supplies into Europe has worried U.S. foreign officials for years, and the expansion of U.S. gas exports to Europe is already undercutting their hold over markets such as Poland and Lithuania, said Assistant Secretary of State for Energy Resources Frank Fannin, a former oil and mining executive. Energy is an important component of statecraft, he said. Having the optionality, even if the importing countries decide not to import LNG, but having the terminals there, it changes the entire market balance vis-a-vis the Russians. It's forced the Russians to consider more market rates. And that's interesting and true, and I think an entirely legitimate marriage, has come to be considered an entirely legitimate marriage of private business interests and American foreign policy interests and American business interests. And to the extent that we believe in the capitalist mantra of the business of America is business, then I guess it's within bounds. You're just not supposed to say, my friends are the ones profiting and they're going to give me a cut in the form of campaign contributions. But that's the way it is with pretty much every industry. Rick Perry, who's taking the name of his agency, the Energy Department, very literally, has been a major part of connecting U.S. liquid natural gas exporters to European markets. This also from the Houston Chronicle. And I think we may have actually looked at this one yesterday. The foreign markets that are importing U.S. liquid natural gas have their own policy reasons for seeking out alternative energy sources. So it's not all about American pressure, but also if they don't buy more expensive American liquid natural gas, and here's where it becomes dicey, Trump will punish them with tariffs. Here she includes a clip from Forbes magazine that reads as follows: as trade tensions over steel, cars, and airplanes mount between Washington and Brussels, the European Union, in case you didn't recognize what Brussels was doing in there, they're where the European Union's economic headquarters are. So where were we? Trade tensions between Washington and the European Union. Yesterday, they tried to calm the situation by convening a summit on an import the two sides both want to see increase: natural gas. Flush with reserves from the shale gas boom, hooray, fracking, the U.S. is eager to export supply to Europe, something that was not possible before because of U.S. laws restricting such exports to only countries with which it has free trade agreements. The EU, in turn, is eager to reduce its dependence on Russian gas. And so the LNG trade started. It's not so long, it's LNG without the O. That screwed me up. So the LNG trade started at a slow pace in April of 2016 after the U.S. changed the export restriction. At a bilateral meeting in Washington last July, President Trump and EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker agreed to that the EU would increase its imports of U.S. LNG in exchange for Trump backing off on his threat to slap import duties on German cars. Since that meeting, the Commission said yesterday, EU imports of U.S. liquefied natural gas have already increased by 272%. The EU plans to increase gas imports to 8 billion cubic meters per year by 2023, more than double the level of 2018. So more than doubling. Again, that's where we get the quintupling, I guess. Okay. So, interesting to see tariffs used as a battering ram for this. Now, back to Ukraine. Simpson says, Ukraine, in many ways, is an attractive market for a new energy supplier. Geographically speaking, Russia would be the logical supplier, except there's the whole invading them and seizing their territory thing. So relying on Russia for energy is a no-go. Which is why, when Ukraine elected a new president, the Trump administration's response was to deploy Rick Perry. Perry attended Zelensky's inauguration, along with Sondland and Senator Johnson, to immediately begin negotiating the terms under which Ukraine would buy American liquid natural gas. Now, the major benefit of American liquid natural gas is that it doesn't come from Russia. But the major drawback of American liquid natural gas is that not only is it traveling a lot further than natural gas from Russia, it also has to be liquefied for transport and then regasified at the other end. Ukraine is already at a disadvantage because the natural gas it's importing is coming from Europe after Europe gets it from Russia. So there's already a markup. But even still, American liquid natural gas is more expensive, a lot more expensive, she says, which means if Ukraine is buying it, it's not about economics. Hence, the ongoing campaign by Rick Perry to negotiate terms with the new Ukrainian administration under which it will agree to buy American liquid natural gas. It's not just about price. Any liquid natural gas deal is part of a bigger package. And other diplomatic concessions are going to be on the table. There's another problem here, though. Ukraine can't actually import liquid natural gas. Not directly. You need a terminal for that, and Ukraine doesn't have one. But Ukraine's neighbor, Poland, has one, and Poland recently signed a 20-year contract to import U.S. natural gas. here an excerpt from a Russian news source, I guess, establishing that that is the case. And here is the first the first explanation of what that, remember that yesterday's acronym PGNIG? We didn't know what it was. It's the Polish gas operator. We still don't know what it stands for in Polish. But, yeah, so this, not sure whether it's worth reading through this entire clip here, but I guess rest assured that it does establish that, in fact, okay, a natural gas regasification terminal was, in fact, constructed in Poland and I guess could be used to supply the Ukrainian market. And then, Susan continues, there's a second problem. Even if Ukraine buys its Freedom LNG from Poland, the gas still has to be transported from Poland to Ukraine. While pipelines do exist, their total capacity is limited. For Ukraine to import more than a trickle of American liquid natural gas, the best short-term solution is probably to build more pipelines between Poland and Ukraine. But then there's a third problem. Those pipelines, way more expensive for Ukraine than for Poland. And another news clip involved here. Does it tell us why it's more expensive? I don't know. A new gas pipeline is in the works that connect Poland and Ukraine, which could see both countries become more independent from Russia's energy supply. Let's see. According to Tomas Stepien, I can't tell you how that's pronounced, the chairman of Gaz System, market research indicates interest in the pipeline, and the Poles are awaiting the decision, not the Poles, lowercase P-O-L-L-S, but Poles from Poland, are awaiting the decision of the Ukrainian side before moving forward with the project. Gaz System and UKR Transgas, like Ukraine Transgas, another actor in the market there, are planning to shift 4 billion cubic meters of gas from Poland to Ukraine in exchange for 1.6 billion cubic meters of gas from Ukraine to Poland per year. I don't even know what to make of that, but okay, a large-scale deal underway to increase pipeline capacity between Poland and Ukraine as part of this as well. And this, Susan continues, I think may be the genesis of Trump's attempts to blame Perry for the Zelensky call. Because one of the sticking points in the negotiations for a new LNG deal in Ukraine was who was going to bear the cost of all those extra miles of pipeline on the Ukrainian side. Ukraine, not unreasonably, wasn't thrilled about the idea of not simply paying a premium for American LNG, but then on top of that, also paying even more for the privilege of a new pipeline that will allow Poland to sell them American LNG at a markup and that Poland profits from. It doesn't sound like a good deal, does it? So when Trump says that Perry told him to make the call to Zelensky because of, quote, something about an LNG plant, I think Perry wanted Trump to pressure Ukraine to go ahead and commit to building its side of the new pipeline. Here a clip included from Axios. Let's see. Behind the scenes, Trump made these comments during a conference call with House members on Friday, according to 3 sources on the call. This would be about in the context of the Ukraine scandal. 2 bullet points included here. Per the sources, Trump rattled off the same things he's been saying publicly, that his call with Zelensky was perfect and he did nothing wrong. But he then threw Perry into the mix and said something to the effect of, not a lot of people know this, but I didn't even want to make the call. The only reason I made the call was because Rick asked me to. Something about an LNG plant, one source said, recalling the president's comments. 2 other sources confirmed the first source's recollection. So there you go. That establishes where that came from. Trump notably failed to actually bring up the LNG issue in his call, at least according to the non-transcript transcript that we've been provided with. Perry may have requested it, but Trump chose to ask about Biden and the 2016 election instead. And for a month after that, no progress was made on the American LNG deal. I still wonder whether if we may see in an expanded transcript of the call, whether there was some mention of it or whether they cut that out of what got released. either because they recognized that that too was a quid pro quo and maybe that was the one they were initially worried about, or because they said, all right, there's an American press feeding frenzy with regard to the Biden request. We can't turn over a transcript that doesn't have any of that in it, at least not credibly, although I don't know why they couldn't just try. But so far we've managed to hide the ball on the liquid natural gas thing, and that's worth money to other people and in kickbacks to us. So let's try and cut that out. No one will think that's relevant. We'll just turn over everything about Biden and then stonewall it. But if we don't have to start stonewalling on the LNG side of the quid pro quo until later, so much the better. I think that might explain it too. All right. So continuing on here, this, Susan says, is where things get dark. If you can believe it's not dark yet. On August 29th, Ukraine learned that Trump was intentionally holding up $250 million in much-needed foreign assistance for its military. Zelensky's aides immediately begin reaching out to the American side for updates on what's going on. And let's see, here some of the Volcker texts are used to illustrate the point, but I think we all know about that part. 2 days after learning that Trump had blocked foreign assistance, Ukraine reversed course and agreed to terms, not so much necessarily on investigating Biden, but agreed to terms to buy American liquid natural gas. That might be the more important part of this. Even though Trump canceled his trip, Rick Perry continued on to Warsaw to sign the trilateral memorandum between the U.S., Poland, and Ukraine. News clip included that illustrates that fact. And then she continues on by saying, well, I just saw the AP story, so I guess the good news is I can cut this tweet thread short since there's no need for me to speculate anymore. And that, I guess, brings us to where we should have landed yesterday on the AP story that confirms all of it so that we wouldn't have to rely on my speculation or Susan Simpson's speculation, although it's fun to give those prominence because I think it's a great thing to be able to point out when people are able to put the pieces together and fill out the theory, although I suppose there's some danger in filling out the theory first and then end up planting, when you read confirmation of it later on, are you subjecting yourself to confirmation bias, or have you had a hand in your own confirmation bias by pushing reporters towards that theory? It can happen if you have a big enough following. I don't know if I do or if Susan Simpson does, but it was also a pretty logical conclusion, quite honestly, right from the beginning. So there are a few more tweets in this, and then we can turn over to the AP article after the break. Susan continues on, and so she says, no need for me to speculate anymore, or at least I can cut down on a lot of the backstory. The too long didn't read version of this then, just to give you an elevator pitch on it, because we did read it, even though it was too long. After the U.S. halted aid, Ukraine caved and agreed to the LNG plan, and an LNG contract was signed with Poland's gas company, PGNiG. But guess what? That deal wasn't with Ukraine's state-owned gas company. Naftogaz, which is Ukraine's state-owned gas company, is who would have been the obvious choice for such a deal. Instead, Poland signed the LNG contract with Energy Resources of Ukraine. What is that? We don't know. Well, we know a little something about it. We know this is a private American-Ukrainian company. Did we have the wrong players at the table? Was this another mess of Trumpian paperwork? Was this, Rick Perry went and he signed a deal, and he went to Warsaw to do it, and the deal purports to be a deal about moving American liquid natural gas to Poland, and from there, through a newly constructed pipeline into Ukraine. That's what the paper says. There are 3 signatures here, and one of them is Ukrainian, so that's the news. Or did we short-circuit things and make a BS deal with not only not the main Ukrainian actor, but not a Ukrainian actor at all? Again, This is Energy Resources of Ukraine, ERU. ERU was founded by a guy named Andrew Favorov, though last year he stepped down from ERU after he was appointed to be the new head of Naftagaz's gas business. So I guess now there's a connection between the two. At this point, Susan says, I was probably going to write a really snarky tweet about how, gee willikers, isn't it just incredible how well things have been working out lately for Favorov and his old company? And golly, I wonder if he knows Parnas and Fruman. But the AP's got me covered here. So that's good news. She includes a clip from the AP piece, but we can just read the whole thing, I guess, and be sure that we get not only that little bit, but all the background that might help us out as well. However, we are bumping up against our top of the hour break. I guess we can get started on that after the break. We can use the little bit of time in between then and now to mention, since his name did come up earlier today, Sondland, Gordon Sondland, U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, subject of a subpoena, I guess. Was he subpoenaed or was he merely invited to testify before the House today? And I think we're talking about that strange combination of the three investigative committees wanting to talk to him. But guess what? It doesn't matter because he's not going to show up. Laura Clausen reported that for us on the front page of Daily Kos. White House blocks key impeachment inquiry witness from speaking to House investigators. Same old, I guess, and they're going to have to figure out, once again, are we going to go to court and try to deal with this, or is there going to be inherent contempt? Is it just going to become an impeachment article? I don't know, but he's due there today, and I guess basically at this point the State Department is directing all of its employees not to cooperate with the House's inquiry. So, well, I don't know how this will resolve itself. We'll see what happens, I guess, and then we'll be back in a minute. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. We also have another tweet thread that we can go to from another great online speculator, Julia Davis, who keeps her finger on the pulse of Russian language news from overseas. Maybe we'll use it as follow-up to the AP article, just to take a break from Twitter threads and use widely disseminated, published mainstream media for the rest of, or at least the next phase of this story. I'm talking about the AP story that came out yesterday titled Profit, Not Politics. Trump's allies sought Ukraine gas deal. Ta-da! So we're all correct here. And, well, I mean, if you believe the AP, there's more reason to believe the AP than there is to believe me. Anyway, but, whatever. I guess, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I guess take it for whatever it's worth, that the AP has more or less the same story. Let's see what their version of it is and whether we have gotten too far ahead of ourselves or too far ahead of the reporting. Desmond Butler, Michael Besecker, and Richard Lardner are the reporters on this one. So if it all goes wrong, it's their fault, I guess. All right, Dateline in Kiev. Here's their work. As Rudy Giuliani was pushing Ukrainian officials last spring to investigate one of Donald Trump's main political rivals, a group of individuals with ties to the president and his personal lawyer were also active in the former Soviet Republic. Their aims were profit, not politics. In fact, I think their aims were both profit and politics, and that's what they thought. They had such a genius win-win on their hands here. The circle of businessmen and Republican donors, they're the same thing, touted connections to Giuliani and Trump while trying to install new management at the top of Ukraine's massive state gas company. And for that matter, new management inside of Ukraine's everything, Ukraine's state, period. Their plan was to then steer lucrative contracts to companies controlled by Trump allies, according to two people with knowledge of their plans. Their plan hit a snag after Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko lost his re-election bid to Vladimir Zelensky, whose conversation with Trump about former Vice President Joe Biden is now at the center of the House impeachment inquiry of Trump. But the effort to install a friendlier management team at the helm of the gas company, Naftogaz, would soon be taken up with Ukraine's new president by U.S. Energy Secretary Rick Perry, whose slate of candidates included a fellow Texan who is one of Perry's past political donors. In other words, just to clarify here, slate of candidates is the new management at Naftogaz, the Ukrainian state energy monopoly, should be a bunch of people from Texas because Rick Perry knew them. And then money could very easily flow from Naftogaz and whatever funded it to Trump and his pockets. It's unclear if Perry's attempts to replace board members at Naftogaz were coordinated with the Giuliani allies pushing for a similar outcome, and no one has alleged that there is criminal activity in any of these efforts, and it's unclear what role, if any, Giuliani had in helping his clients push to get gas sales agreements with the state-owned company. But that's only because we haven't asked very many questions about it. And if we do, Giuliani will lie about it in his answers. But the affair shows how those with ties to Trump and his administration were pursuing business deals in Ukraine that went far beyond advancing the president's personal political interests. And I guess here we'll just chime in to say pushing the personal interests of the president is criminal enough, and a quid pro quo and all the things that he says there's none of in this deal, and corruption on its face. But there's the soft corruption of using political power to leverage business advantage that's whitewashed through the decisions of another government. You know, we ordinarily will never get to the bottom of the motivations of the Ukrainian government to change its regulatory system such that foreign players in the gas industry are allowed into the market. That falls under the umbrella of westernizing your market, reforming your markets. That's a good thing in Western capitalist eyes, not just because the money flows to the West, but because it's a market-based reform, or it can be disguised as a market-based reform, even if it's not market-based, even if the things are being handed out only as plums to preferred partners who are paying the premium that it takes to get the decision made. It's still viewed as westernization and reform. That's just where we are in late capitalism, I guess. Anyway, it's interesting that they put it this way. Trump, the affair shows how those with ties to Trump and his administration were pursuing business deals in Ukraine that went far beyond advancing the president's personal political interests. They were there for their own reasons as well. And as far as the president was concerned, at a minimum, even if they don't get the Biden information, there are kickbacks to the campaign, which are problematical by themselves. It also raises questions about whether Trump allies were mixing business and politics, just as Republicans were calling for a probe of Biden and his son Hunter, who served 5 years on the board of another Ukrainian energy company, Burisma. In other words, of course, while screaming about corruption in Ukraine and how dare Hunter Biden trade on his political connections to make money in the gas industry in Ukraine, the whole thing is being driven. Please investigate Hunter Biden for corruptly using his political connections to gain entree into the gas market in Ukraine, said the two guys who were using their political connections to gain entree into the gas market in Ukraine. You see what our problem is? On Friday, Trump told a group of Republican lawmakers that it had been Perry who had prompted the phone call in which Trump asked Zelensky for a favor regarding Biden, according to a person familiar with Trump's remarks. And even if you think Perry is innocent here, what he's saying at best is Rick Perry, Donald Trump, you stand accused of bank robbery, armed robbery. How do you plead? Well, True, I was packing a gun. Yes, I asked them to put all the money in a bag and told them that if they did so, no one would get hurt. But Rick Perry is the one who asked me to go into the bank and get change for a 20. So it's really his fault. The person who spoke to AP on condition of anonymity to describe a closed conversation among GOP officials recounted that Trump said it was Perry who asked him to make the July call to discuss something about an LNG plant. He didn't even know what. Right? Trump's remarks were first reported Saturday by the news site Axios, they note in here. And by the way, great job as president there. The energy secretary says, I need you to call, and probably didn't say, call the president of Ukraine and tell him something about an LNG plant. Now, there was probably a memo and everything. This is what is going on here. It involves an LNG plant. Here's what I need you to say to the president so that something can happen of substance and people can make money, and then they can kick part of that money back to us in donations to the Republican Party and re-election bids, etc. And Trump, oaf that he is, didn't read the memo, or maybe he did and he knows that it's problematic and so disguised it as something about an LNG plant. It might be that he's dumb and doesn't remember. It might be that he's dumb and is trying to cover up a crime, which is, I guess, sort of a smart thing for a criminal to do, but dumb to be involved in the crime in the first place. While it's unclear whether Trump's remark Friday referred specifically to the behind-the-scenes maneuvers this spring involving the multi-billion-dollar state gas company, the Associated Press has interviewed 4 people with direct knowledge of the attempts to influence Naftogaz, and their accounts show Perry playing a key role in the effort. 3 of the 4 spoke on condition of anonymity for fear of retaliation. The 4th is an American businessman with close ties to the Ukrainian energy sector. A spokeswoman for the U.S. Energy Department said Perry, a former Texas governor and Republican presidential candidate, remember, was not advancing anyone's personal interests. She said his conversations with Ukrainian officials about Naftogaz were part of his efforts to reform the country's energy sector and create an environment in which Western companies can do business, which is really, I guess, ordinarily someone else's job, but, okay, so whatever. He's expanding his portfolio. At least he knows how to talk about turning bribery into energy sector reform. That's the way you talk about these things. The accepted way of talking about it. He's normalizing it. Perry was asked about the AP's reporting on Monday while in Lithuania, where he was meeting with officials from Ukraine, because there's no offices in Ukraine. You can't meet there. You got to do it in Lithuania. Also other Eastern European countries. So I guess they were all gathered in Lithuania. They were all gathered there to discuss energy security and cooperation. He said any suggestion that he tried to force a management change at Naftogaz was a, quote, totally dreamed up story. We get asked for our recommendations about people who are experts in various areas, Perry said, folks who have expertise in particular areas. Obviously, having been the governor of the state of Texas, I know a lot of people in the energy industry. That's probably true. Because, of course, they all bribed him when he was the governor of Texas. Perry also confirmed he had urged Trump to call Zelensky, but said the subject was the potential growth of Ukraine's energy sector. Boy, oh boy, I'm sure that was tops on the list there. Mr. President, why don't you call the president of another country and talk about the potential growth of their energy sector? Sure, I'll get right on that. Okay. Absolutely, I asked the president multiple times. Mr. President, we think it is in the United States and the Ukraine's best interest that you and the president of Ukraine have conversations, that you discuss the options that are there, Perry said, recounting his conversations with Trump. And that could really be even true. The Trump and Giuliani allies driving the attempt to change the senior management at Naftogaz, however, appear to have had inside knowledge of the U.S. government's plans in Ukraine. How could that happen, right? For example, they told people that Trump would replace the U.S. ambassador there months before she was actually recalled to Washington, according to 3 of the individuals interviewed by the AP. One of the individuals said he was so concerned by the whole affair that he reported it to a U.S. embassy official in Ukraine months ago. Another whistleblower. What do you know? But yes, so add insider trading to the charges as well. Who are these businessmen? Ukraine, a resource-rich nation that sits on the geographic and symbolic border between Russia and the West, has long been plagued by corruption and government dysfunction, making it a magnet for foreign profiteers. Aha! But we're reforming things, you see. At the center of the Naftogaz plan, according to 3 individuals familiar with the details, were 3 such businessmen. 2 Soviet-born Florida real estate entrepreneurs, yes, Lev Parnas and Igor Fruman, and an oil magnate from Boca Raton, Florida, named Harry Sargent III. Parnas and Fruman have made hundreds of thousands of dollars in political donations to Republicans, including $325,000 to a Trump-allied political action committee in 2018. This helped the relatively unknown entrepreneurs gain access to top levels of the Republican Party, including meetings with Trump at the White House and Mar-a-Lago. The 2 have also faced lawsuits from disgruntled investors over unpaid debts. During the same period they were pursuing the Naftogaz deal, the 2 were coordinating with Giuliani to set up meetings with Ukrainian government officials and push for an investigation of the Bidens. What's it going to take to get the Trump administration to parrot the language that Perry is using, to reform the energy sector in Ukraine to help them westernize? Well, to make that a priority is going to take paying Republicans a bunch of money. How can we pay the Republicans a bunch of money if we don't have a bunch of money? Well, we had that scheme to, if we are pushing them to get people out, first I guess they have to come up with the idea, we can make a killing in natural gas in Ukraine. How they come by that knowledge, I'm not entirely certain, except I guess they're Ukrainian connections. I mean, maybe the Ukrainian oligarchs that they know say, yeah, I'm an oligarch because I'm a player in the energy market. You can become one too. The only thing is, I'll become an ultra oligarch if I can push the current leadership of Naftogaz aside, and you can get a significant cut of that and become a minor oligarch if you help me do that. One of the ways we can do that is have the United States press for it under the guise of reform of the sector. Will you help me out? I will, but we're going to need operating capital to do it. Okay, here's, a couple $1 million, and you can launder it into campaign contributions to Trump, and that should give you the leverage you need to get your part of the deal done. And I guess that's what's happening. And some of the money also may have come from simply defrauding Americans by telling them things like, oh yeah, I'm a movie producer, and if you give me $500,000, we'll make this Hollywood movie. And then I'm not making the movie. I am taking the money and donating it to the Trump super PAC so I can complete my deal with the natural gas oligarchs in Ukraine instead. That's much more lucrative than making the movie. And they just Ponzi it for the first couple of months. That may also be where the source of the money is. And that's important because it ended up in Republican campaign coffers. If the money is stolen, you're going to want to find out from where. But, we're just going to do a quick hit impeachment and just say it's all about the phone call. And this is connected to everything, as we said. All right, so Parnas and Fruman have also faced lawsuits from disgruntled investors over unpaid debts, right? While they were trying to pursue this Naftogaz deal, they were likewise telling the Trump administration, we're only giving you $325,000. That's not as much as others are giving you. Sondland, for instance, gave you $1 million just for the inauguration committee. That went straight into Trump's pocket. He got the ambassadorship. How are we going to be major players? Well, we also speak Ukrainian. And our contacts in Ukraine tell us that the place is ripe for pursuing one of your favorite conspiracy theory hobby horses about Biden, and we can facilitate that. Now we want to have you to the White House. $325,000 is nice, but this, if it's what you say it is, I love it, especially later in my administration. Now, Sargent, the American, his wife and corporate entities are all tied to the, or rather, all the things tied to the family. I'll read this again. Sargent, his wife, and corporate entities tied to the family, have donated at least $1.2 million, bigger money, to Republican campaigns and PACs over the last 20 years, including $100,000 in June to help the Trump Victory Fund, according to federal and state campaign finance records. He's also served as finance chair of the Florida State GOP and gave nearly $14,000 to Giuliani's failed 2008 presidential campaign. Aha. So now we're talking. In early March, Fruman, Parnas, and Sargent were touting a plan to replace Naftogaz's CEO, Andrei Kobolyev, with another senior executive at the company, Andrew Favorov. Do you remember that name from anywhere? I'll give you a minute to think about it. But yes, we just read about it in Susan's thread. So, how interesting. Andrew Favorov was their favorite for taking over Naftogaz, and I guess he moved over there, didn't he? This according to two individuals who spoke to the AP, as well as a memorandum about the meeting that was later submitted to the U.S. Embassy in Kiev. By the way, they're changing the spelling over there at the AP, switching over from K-I-E-V to K-Y-I-V. I guess trying to encourage a better pronunciation of Kiev rather than Kiev. Anyway, going back to the Obama administration, the U.S. Energy Department and the State Department have long supported efforts to import American natural gas into Ukraine to reduce the country's dependence on Russia. And that makes some geopolitical sense, right? The three approached Favorov with the idea while the Ukrainian executive, Favorov, was attending an energy industry conference in Texas. Parnas and Fruman told them they had flown in from Florida on a private jet, woo-wee, to recruit him to be their partner in a new venture to export up to 100 tanker shipments a year of U.S. liquefied gas into Ukraine, where Naftogaz is the largest distributor, according to two people briefed on the details. And I guess Favorov was supposed to be impressed by the fact that they came on a private jet. Wow, they're real players. Like, how could you possibly import liquid natural gas into Ukraine? I've never heard of you. Yes, but we do have a private jet. Well, that makes you a wealthy American type person. Maybe you really do have access to this. I mean, Trump's whole career is based on that. Sargent told Favorov that he regularly meets with Trump at Mar-a-Lago and that the gas sales plan had the president's full support, according to the two people who said Favorov recounted the discussion to them. May or may not have had the president's full support. They may have been freelancing and lying about it. They may really have believed it. It may have been true. Or it may have been that they once told him about it at Mar-a-Lago and he said, yeah, sounds great. And they interpreted that as full support. We don't know. It's somewhere along that range. Or just an outright lie. Or possibly a lie by the people who are recounting the conversations. That's true too. The conversations were recounted to AP by Dale W. Perry, who might be a huge liar, an American who is a former business partner of Favorov. He told AP in an interview that Favorov described the meeting to him soon after it happened, and that Favorov perceived it to be a shakedown. Sounds like one, right? Perry, who is no relation to the energy secretary, allegedly, yes, probably not, is the managing partner of Energy Resources of Ukraine. Remember them? Which currently has business agreements to import natural gas and electricity to Ukraine. That's someplace we need to take over, right? A second person who spoke on condition of anonymity also confirmed to the AP that Favorov had recounted details of the Houston meeting to him. According to Dale Perry and the other person, Favorov said Parnas told him Trump planned to remove U.S. Ambassador Marie Yovanovitch and replace her with someone more open to aiding their business interests. Dale Perry told the AP he was so concerned about the efforts to change the management at Naftogaz and get rid of Yovanovitch that he reported what he had heard to Surya Jayanti, the State Department Foreign Service officer stationed at the U.S. Embassy in Kiev, who focuses on the energy industry. He also wrote a detailed memo about Favrov's account dated April 12th, which was shared with another current State Department official. Perry recently provided a copy of the April memo to AP. And now, of course, we're in the stage where the Secretary of State is ordering all State Department personnel to cease cooperation with the House. And I guess this is why. A Florida lawyer representing Sergeant Christopher Kise, I guess Kise, issued a statement Monday confirming that his client was at the Houston dinner with Parnas, Fruman, and Favrov, but insisted he was only there to offer, quote, broad industry guidance and his expert view on the challenges presented by operating in foreign markets. Attending a single informal dinner in Houston does not place Mr. Sargent at the center of any Naftogaz or Ukrainian business plan, Kise said. Mr. Sargent never discussed any role or participation in any Ukrainian venture, nor any specifics regarding the potential business ventures of the other dinner participants. We'll see. The statement did not address whether Yovanovitch's fate was discussed at the dinner. Kise also said Sargent has not met at Mar-a-Lago with Trump since he became president. So, I mean, I guess all the bragging of, I go and I talk to Trump at Mar-a-Lago all the time, except for the time when he's in power, and then I don't. Okay, that doesn't sound like it's true. And probably, bet you anything we can find him on security cam at Mar-a-Lago. Anyway, the statement did not, oh yes, we read that part. On March 24th, Giuliani and Parnas gathered at the Trump International Hotel in Washington with Healy E. Baumgardner, a former Trump campaign advisor who once served as deputy communications director for Giuliani's presidential campaign and as a communications official during the George W. Bush administration. She's now listed as the CEO of 45 Energy Group. See if you can guess where that name came from. They'll tell you in just a minute. A Houston-based energy company whose website describes it as a government relations, public affairs, and business development practice group. The company's name is an apparent nod to Trump, the 45th president, even though she was a George W. Bush administration person and a Giuliani campaign person, not primarily a Trump person, but there just aren't enough primarily Trump people to fill all these jobs. This was a couple of weeks after the Houston meeting with Favrov, the Naftogaz executive. Giuliani, Parnas, and Baumgardner were there to make a business pitch involving gas deals in the former Soviet bloc to a potential investor. This time, according to Giuliani, the deals that were discussed involved Uzbekistan, not Ukraine. I have not pursued a deal in Ukraine. I don't know about a deal in the Ukraine. He calls it the Ukraine. I would not do a deal in the Ukraine now, obviously, said Giuliani. Where have I heard that line before? This was when he was reached during the playoff baseball game between the Yankees and the Twins. There's absolutely no proof that I did it because I didn't do it, which basically, of course, means he did it. During this meeting, Parnas again repeated that Yovanovitch, the U.S. ambassador in Kiev, would soon be replaced, according to a person with direct knowledge of the gathering. She was removed 2 months later. Giuliani, who serves as Trump's personal lawyer, maybe, and has no official role in government, maybe, acknowledged Friday that he was among those pushing the president to replace the ambassador, a career diplomat with a history of fighting corruption. Wow. Sounds like a good person to have there. The ambassador to Ukraine was replaced, he said. I did play a role in that. But Giuliani refused to discuss the details of his business dealings or whether he helped his associates in their push to forge gas sales contracts with the Ukrainian company. And by the way, they're using the term, I would say, in the wrong sense, to forge gas sales contracts, to create them. But I would say that that's not a bad idea. They should look into whether or not they forged any of their sales contracts to get other people to invest in them. Anyway, Giuliani did describe Sargent as a friend and referred to Parnas and Fruman as his clients in a tweet in May. As part of their impeachment inquiry, House Democrats have subpoenaed Giuliani for documents and communications related to dozens of people, including Favrov, Parnas, Fruman, and Baumgardner's 45 Energy Group. The House Intelligence Committee also issued sweeping documents requests to Parnas and Fruman due Monday, and scheduled depositions for later in the week. I bet they're not getting anything on that. John Dowd is back in the picture. John Dowd, the former Trump attorney, who now represents Parnas and Fruman, I guess alongside Giuliani, who claims them as clients, said he and his clients have not yet decided whether to comply. I think yesterday they actually ended up not complying or announcing that they wouldn't comply in a letter from John Dowd to the committee, written in Comic Sans, by the way, subject of a lot of attention on the internet. Democrats on Monday threatened to issue subpoenas if they don't show. Well, they didn't. We'll see what happens today. We'll see what happens. I'm sure it'll all work out. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Lots more happening and just keeping an eye on Twitter. Things developing faster than normal, and the president is up in anger tweeting and trying to defend himself in all of this. Not doing a particularly good job with it and being debunked more or less in real time by some of the better reporters on the beat. That gives us something to talk about for the rest of the week as well. Let's continue on here with the AP article, which appears to have, there's a lot more left, as it seems, and it's going to make it difficult on Scott writing our summary. There's just, it'll end up being, you have to stretch this whole thing out. We're only talking about 2 or 3 links here, but it seems like important stuff. Okay, where did we leave off? Yes. Did we read this? And I can't recall where we stopped. Baumgartner, right. All right. So the subpoena is being issued, and we're in the process of seeing them defied yesterday, today, and probably into tomorrow. There was John Dowd and his Comic Sans printed letter. Baumgartner issued a written statement as well, saying, "While I won't comment on business discussions, I will say this. This political assault on private business by the Democrats in Congress is complete harassment and an invasion of privacy that should scare the hell out of every American business owner." Well, every American business owner that does business this way. And I know that that's been normalized, and I know that people from the George W. Bush administration think that that's the way business is normally done, but it really isn't. We've gotten away from it, and it's time to re-normalize how business is conducted here and stop encouraging American business to treat the international sector as a law-free zone because American laws, business laws, don't apply. It's not the way it works. All right. Baumgartner later denied that she had any business dealings in Ukraine, but refused to say whether the replacement of Ambassador Yovanovitch was discussed. Dowd said it was actually the Naftogaz executives who approached his clients about making a deal. Dowd says the group then approached Rick Perry to get the energy department on board. The people from the company solicited my clients because Igor is in the gas business. He's not. And they asked him, and they flew to Washington, and they solicited, Dowd said. They sat down and talked about it. And then it was presented to Secretary Perry to see if they could get it together. The big problem with all of that is those guys haven't been in the gas business for more than a couple of months. They formed a company that said it was in the energy business, but it's the egg to this chicken. They want to be able to claim that they're in the energy business, and that's why they were meeting with these people, but they were only in the energy business because they already knew they could meet with these people and leverage their relationships with them to put them into the gas business by cheating, by pushing the Ukrainian government, using the leverage of the American government to change the structure of the way energy is distributed in Ukraine to include them. That's what's really happening behind this. Anyway, Dowd then concludes by saying it wasn't a shakedown. It was an attempt to do legitimate business that didn't work out. I want to do some legitimate business. That usually is a good indicator of what's going on here. Okay, let's see. The Energy Secretary's involvement comes up next. In May, Rick Perry traveled to Kiev to serve as the senior U.S. government representative at the inauguration of the country's new president. Why wouldn't a political person, who's actually involved in geopolitics go? The president would normally go. The vice president might go in his stead if the country's an S-hole and not important enough. But this got bumped down even lower. Couldn't even send the Secretary of State to do this one. The Energy Secretary is going to be our representative. Sure, why not? In a private meeting with Zelensky, Perry pressed the Ukrainian president to fire members of the Naftogaz advisory board. And fire your prosecutor. Fire your Naftogaz advisory board. Demand the removal of the American ambassador here. Everybody needs to get fired, apparently. Attendees left the meeting with the impression that Perry wanted to replace the American representative, Amos Hochstein, a former diplomat and energy representative who served in the Obama administration, with someone reputable in Republican circles, according to someone who was in the room. Perry's push for Ukraine's state-owned natural gas company, Naftogaz, to change its supervisory board was first reported by Politico. A second meeting during the trip at a Kiev hotel included Ukrainian officials and energy sector people. There, Perry made clear that the Trump administration wanted to see the entire Naftogaz supervisory board replaced, according to a person who attended both meetings. Perry again referenced the list of advisors that he had given Zelensky, and it was widely interpreted that he wanted Michael Blazer, Bleyzer, a Ukrainian-American businessman, from Texas, to join the newly formed board, the person said. Also on the list was Robert Bensch, Bensh, another Texan who frequently works in Ukraine, the Energy Department confirmed. Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, of which Ukraine is not a member, and Kurt Volker, then the State Department's special envoy to Ukraine, were also in the room, according to photographs reviewed by AP. The person, who spoke on condition of anonymity due to fear of retaliation, said he was floored by the American requests because the person had always viewed the U.S. government as, quote, having a higher ethical standard. Whoops. Womp womp, trombone sound. The Naftogaz Supervisory Board is supposed to be selected by the Ukrainian president's cabinet in consultation with international institutions, including the International Monetary Fund, the United States, and the European Union. Okay. Maybe there is there's still not really a connection for Sondland there. I mean, the Naftogaz Supervisory Board, I guess in an effort to westernize, to prove that they're westernized, and all of this is somewhat smarmy, but in order to prove that they're westernized, which is code for you can invest here and have some hope of getting your money back rather than having it all stolen through corruption, they are committed to appointing to the supervisory board of their gas monopoly members suggested to them by the IMF, the United States, and the European Union, the main investors that they're looking to. The fact that they include the European Union on that, though, does not really actually open the door to Gordon Sondland being there. The EU has suggestions they want to make. Possibly the United States could call on their ambassador to the EU to lean on EU leadership about who they'll select for, or who they would nominate anyway, to serve on the supervisory board. But the U.S. has its own seat at the table. The fact that they intend to show up with their own list, plus try to force the EU to include their people on the EU list, would not be a valid reason for Sondland to show up there. Let's see. Anyway, all of this ends up having to be approved by the Ukrainian cabinet, which, is another hurdle, and I guess is designed to be some kind of protection against international manipulation of Ukraine's natural resources. But of course, if you're being held over a barrel and you're not going to get the money you need to defend your territorial integrity from the Russians, you consider whether to give that protection up and say, money gets skimmed out of the gas concern all the time. This was our turn to skim it, but we have bigger, more pressing problems. We need Javelin missiles. So we'll give away a cut of the gas money to these guys. Ukrainian officials perceived Perry's push to swap out the board as circumventing that established process, according to the person in the room. U.S. Energy Department spokeswoman Shaylin Hines said Perry had consistently called for the modernization, and that's a great euphemism, the modernization of Ukraine's business and energy sector in an effort to create an environment that will incentivize Western companies to do business there. Executives make a bundle. That's how to incentivize Western companies to do business. I mean, how do you incentivize Western companies to do business in the United States? By promising the executives a bundle. Anyway, she said Perry delivered that same message in May in a meeting with Zelensky. What he did not do is advocate for the business interests of any one individual or company, Hines said Saturday. That is fiction being pushed by those who are disingenuously seeking to advance a nefarious narrative that does not exist. Oh, it exists. Hines said the Ukrainian government had requested U.S. recommendations, and I'm sure that they do at some level, to advise the country on energy matters, and Perry provided those recommendations. I mean, on a corrupt basis, but he provided them. But I guess she has a point in that being asked to provide recommendations in itself isn't a sign of corruption. But of course, there's a difference between, we do recognize an opportunity for the United States, the European Union, and the IMF to make recommendations, but the cabinet will select from among your recommendations or reject your recommendations, I guess. Could happen too. But we recognize that we would lose your confidence in terms of pushing investors our way if we ignored all of your suggestions. But we'll go ahead with this. But we also recognize that you're telling us that you're going to screw us in the defense sector unless we allow ourselves to be screwed in the energy sector. So, okay, fine. But, that's the language that you're supposed to couch this stuff in. Hines said the Ukrainian government had requested U.S. recommendations, right? And Perry provided those recommendations. He confirmed Blazer was on the list. Blazer, whose company is based in Houston, did not respond on Saturday to a voicemail seeking comment. Bench also did not respond to a phone message. Perry has close ties, of course, to the Texas oil and gas industry. He appointed Blazer to a 2-year term on State Technologies Fund board in 2009. The following year, records show Blazer donated $20,000 to Perry's re-election campaign. Zelensky's office declined to comment on Saturday. But by the way, just a nod to the fully normalized system of bribery that we have. I'll put you on a stupid board. You give me $20,000. Happens all the time. In an interview Friday with the Christian Broadcasting Network, Perry said, because he's talking to Christians, as God as my witness. I think it's supposed to be as God is my witness, but I don't know. I guess it's still proper English to say God appearing as my witness. He says he never discussed Biden or his son in meetings with Ukrainian or U.S. officials. That may be true, including Trump or Giuliani. He did confirm that he had a conversation with Giuliani by phone, but a spokeswoman for the energy secretary declined to say when that call was or whether the two had discussed Naftogaz. In Lithuania on Monday, Perry said he could not recall whether Blazer's name was on the list provided to Zelensky. Come on, give me a break. But Perry confirmed he had known Blazer for years and called him a really brilliant, capable businessman. I would recommend him for a host of different things in Kiev because he knows the country, Perry said of Blazer. He's from there, so why not? I mean, I would be stunned if someone said that you would eliminate Michael Blazer from a recommendation of people you ought to talk to about how to do business in the country, whether they're knowledgeable. It'd be remarkable if I didn't say, talk to Michael. And, he's speaking the correct language there. That's probably true. I mean, it also has the ancillary benefit of enriching Republicans and putting someone you know and trust in charge of running the gas sector of a totally different country. But they opened themselves up to that. But they only did so because they want investment in their country, and they're trying to westernize, and that's supposed to be a good thing in itself. But of course, we have to leverage it for money. It's just, rotten business practices. Let's see. During all of this, Mike Musson has sent us this information. One report yesterday said that Rick Perry attended the Ukraine president's inauguration, gave him the list, right? So we covered some of that. At least one person on the list previously gave money to Perry, that according to CBS report. But I guess AP has covered that as well. So corroboration there. And, well, that's of some interest. Let's see. I've got a couple other things in pocket here, some of which spring directly from this and help us think of another angle to explore in all of this. But others have totally different stories. I'm going to thumb through some of these things. Maybe we can change direction just a little bit, give Scott a little bit more to write about, and then we can return to the deeper details of Ukraine contained in these other articles, perhaps for tomorrow. I don't know. Anyway, let's see. Other bits and pieces of news that should probably be included in today's roundup. I see the tweet of Hans Nichols, NBC correspondent, who says the White House has confirmed that Trump has invited President Erdogan of Turkey to the White House on November 13th. He's been before. And of course, last time I think he was here, his security people beat up all the Turkish-American protesters that were out in front of his embassy, and we did nothing about that. So that seems bad. But in exchange for God only knows what, just, let's see, the last controversial foreign leader whose country was embroiled in controversy to make a visit to the United States and sit down with the president was the Ukrainian president. And everyone wants to know what the quid pro quo was on stepping out of the way for Turkey to invade northern Syria was. And I guess we'll see what happens on November 13th and find out then. Let's see. We have, of course, all of the people defying their subpoenas. That's all covered in Laura's write-up about this. Let's see. Oh, yes, Manu Raju, reporting for CNN, likewise notes that Ambassador Gordon Sondland has been told by state not to appear this morning before the House, so he won't. His attorney, Robert Luskin, said Tuesday morning that he has no choice. He is a sitting ambassador and an employee of state and is required to follow their direction. He could get fired, for instance. And wouldn't it be a horrible thing for this billionaire to get fired from his maybe $180,000, maybe $200,000 a year or so job from the State Department and have to rely on his own billions of dollars to finance his lifestyle? And by the way, don't forget, he is, of course, ambassador to the European Union, which the Trump administration wants everyone to leave. And also, we read in his profile the other day, he's barely over there anyway. One of the, did we read it? Or maybe I read it off the air. But apparently, in the various profiles of Gordon Sondland, and about how he rubs everyone the wrong way. And I think maybe that's something we can, I'll check whether we read it or not. If it's still hanging out there, we can use that for a future show in this week. But apparently he was just never in Brussels because he doesn't really actually believe in the European Union. So he's not interested in being ambassador there. Oh, let's see. Speaking of the ambassadors, by the way, one of the things that I saw fly by earlier that I thought I might give some additional thought to, a random tweet, it seems, from Tim Murphy, the Mother Jones reporter, who says, the institutionalized corruption of the donors as ambassadors game is how you end up with a constitutional crisis involving the, quote, founder and chairman of Provenance Hotels, which is, of course, who Sondland is. He says, I've heard okay arguments for it, that it's essentially a form of triage, but it's also just as is at its best, I guess, selling government titles. And at its worst, well, I guess he just leaves it there, but clearly corruption. But it was a great entree to talk about taking that scam even further, as some offshore countries have done, simply selling their ambassadorships to people who aren't even citizens of those countries, not to mention also selling passports to the ultra-wealthy from other countries who find it convenient for whatever reason to carry second, third, fourth, fifth passports. The most celebrated of which, I would say, is, at least in our little circles here, Paolo Zampoli, who variously, along with Jeffrey Epstein, both claimed to have been the person to introduce Trump to Melania, which is kind of weird and something a little bit, quite honestly, quite disgusting, and a detail you would want to bury now that we know so much more about Jeffrey Epstein. But Paolo Zampoli likewise made the claim. He claims, and his background is, they were similar to Trump's way back in his hangout with Epstein days. Paolo Zampoli considered himself to be a modeling impresario and was, like so many others in the Trump circles, constantly dogged by, or celebrated for in those days, allegations that he was trafficking in vulnerable and often very young women and occasionally girls. And hey, a lot of them were from Eastern Europe too. Just a weird thing. Paolo Zampoli currently, in his current incarnation, not unlike Ghislaine Maxwell, who just sort of reinvented herself and floated away from the controversy and pretends to be an international philanthropist now because she started out wealthy, used her money to finance her dirty habits and penchant for kidnapping and rape, as it happens. But she then just converted it to be, oh, now I'm going to be an international philanthropist and activist instead. And people just believe that, and they end up doing things like, going to Dallas Cowboys football games with them, or sitting around and pretending that she wasn't involved in a massive international conspiracy to kidnap teenagers and rape them. But what can you do? That's society for you. Likewise, though, I was saying Paolo Zampoli, I believe he is some sort of like ambassador at large to the United Nations for the island nation of Dominica, which basically just sold him the title outright. And he loves to make a practice of telling his ultra-wealthy friends that they can buy passports from Dominica as well. And I'm not really sure how that whole thing works out. I don't move in those circles. So I don't know exactly how that is a scheme that finances itself or how it's allowed to go on. Just one of the many filthy, disgusting things that goes on in the seamy underbelly of the society, that part of society we are all supposed to admire and emulate and aspire to be a part of by working hard and being an entrepreneur in this country. And really, largely, you just can't move to the level that it takes to finance this sort of garbage without cheating horribly. But they all watch one another's backs because they know that, they all have compromising information about one another. And this is how we got to be rich. And let's just go to parties and give each other checks for our stupid charities and pretend we're real people here. Okay. And as I'm doing that, I'm gazing over here at the photograph of Senator McConnell and his Chinese pirate wife, Elaine Chao, dressed up to go to a black tie dinner, and she operates in those circles as well. So, anyway, didn't get to that story yet today. Other things probably worth considering, though, and we should get to that story. The news is, maybe we could just skip over to that one, and I'll read you in the absence of probable absence from the show of Joan tomorrow, since we'll be off the air. I'll give you a Joan McCarter story. Transportation Secretary Chow turned her department into a gravy train for Kentucky and McConnell. And if you hadn't guessed that this was going to happen, then you were, I don't know, in a coma, I guess. But here it is. Now it's just all out there. You knew it was happening. Now we have proof. Donald Trump's presidency and Elaine Chao's position in the cabinet has been very, very good to Chao's spouse, Moscow Mitch McConnell. Politico has found out just how good. In her first 14 months in office, 1/4 of all of Chao's scheduled meetings with local officials about Department of Transportation projects were with Kentuckians. What do you know? It's Infrastructure Week in Kentucky anyway. And no, Kentucky did not have 25% of the nation's transportation projects from January 2017 through March of 2018. At least 5 of the 18 meetings Chow had in those months with local officials from Kentucky were requested by McConnell's staff and were identified as friends or loyal supporters of McConnell. Subtle, huh? Some of the officials who met with Chow had active grant applications before the Department of Transportation through competitive programs, supposedly, and the emails indicate that the meetings sometimes involved the exchange of information about grants and opportunities for the officials to plead their case directly before Chow. So you have to wonder how competitive those programs actually are. Clearly, Chow was giving deferential treatment to McConnell's friends and supporters and to projects in their state. Tom Watson, the mayor of Owensboro, Kentucky, made it clear after his town secured $1.5 million in funding. He thanked Chow aide Todd Inman, who was also a former McConnell campaign staffer, for, quote, so many high-level staffers to answer questions and give advice on transit, roads, and the political process needed to move our projects along, such as I-165. Then the icing on the cake, time with Secretary Chow herself. As if that wasn't enough sucking up, he continued, what a kind and generous lady, not to mention extremely smart, a true public servant, and a great friend to OBKY, Owensboro, Kentucky. Officials from other states don't have as much luck getting a meeting with Chow. Ever since she came in, it's been very hard to figure out how to get time with her. Beth Osborne, Executive Director of Transportation for America, told Politico. Her organization advises localities on transportation projects and urban planning. At the beginning of the administration, we got a lot of questions about what it takes to meet with the secretary. People don't ask anymore. It's like they've given up. When Osborne heard from officials she works with that they couldn't get meetings, she suggested that they invite Chow to their states to see the projects. And while I was giving that recommendation, I kept hearing from folks, oh, she doesn't accept invitations to such things. She just doesn't do that, Osborne said. And I heard that repeatedly. We offered, and we were told she just doesn't do trips. That's not her thing. Her thing, it appears, is making sure that the bucks go to Kentucky and that her husband keeps his job. So yeah, I can't be bothered to travel around the country and look into various infrastructure projects as Secretary of Transportation. I either need to hang out and figure out how to get more money funneled into Kentucky, or want to go shopping, or am busy running my Chinese piracy outfit. I'm not interested in seeing what else needs to be funded out there. I know Kentucky needs to be funded. And if there's other money too, then let the bureaucrats hand it out. So interesting topic. And just another subject, another issue area where the corruption is rampant. And I thought I should update you on that one. Coming to the end of our time here together today. And I know it's been mostly unilaterally focused on the backgrounds of Parnas and Fruman and their connection to Ukraine, but I think that's an important part of the story. I'm pleased that we were able to ferret that out and then get confirmation of the story from real reporters, and tip of the hat to the real reporters who do the hard work of confirming this stuff. They seem to be on it, and I say that only because they confirm everything I already believed about it, and they're great at doing it, and so I really appreciate that. But really, honestly, we would not know anything about these things. We don't do the original reporting here. We do the theorizing. We read and analyze and try and come up with explanations and basically good old-fashioned, here's what I think about these articles. And I'm pleased that you enjoy it and find it, that it gets you through your day. So I appreciate all of you who listen in on these, especially these extra speculative shows. Tomorrow we will be off the air, but I think there certainly seems to be enough material to put something together to keep you busy tomorrow. We'll be back on the air live on Thursday, and for now, please do stay tuned to our next program. For our next program, Justice Putnam, as you know, brings you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. He's got a little bit that we didn't cover today. Let's see. Jay Sekulow back in the news today. Says, going to a foreign government and asking for dirt on a political rival is the dictionary definition of an impeachable offense, it is said.
From Daily Co's
I
Radio
must have got that story
on
wrong.
networksradio.com.
I see. Despite his
Have been
gobbledygook,
listening
that's
to
the
the
definition.
Kagro in the Morning Show.
With David Waldman.
Yeah, you probably figured I was messing that one up. And let's go to another story. 73 House Republicans want to punish Adam Schiff for accurately describing Trump's Ukraine call. 90 former national security officials signed a letter supporting the Ukraine whistleblowers, and more than 130,000 new voting machines could cause more distrust in U.S. elections.